Good afternoon. I'm glad everybody was able to arrive today. I'm Howard Paden, or Sionagad Udawadisgv, Yonegun Howard Paden. This should be a very interesting session this afternoon. We have a lot of good people on this panel, and we are asking everybody to ask questions. We will try to get consolidate as many of the questions as we can. So I'm Howard. I work with the language department. We are a newly formed department that has the Master Apprentice Immersion School and translations, all underneath one roof. We're very, very excited. Chief Hoskin has done a great job of really pushing language, and so we're getting to be able to do some neat things. And so some of these guys will mention that and talk more about it, and surely I'll be back here in just a little while to express a few thoughts. So with that being said, we'll go on to the next panelist. Well,
Roy?
Udawadisgv, Kali Alika Kidoa, Kanikal Hadawadoa. Hello everyone, my name is Roy Boney Jr. I'm the Cherokee Language Program Manager, so that means that by translation, language technology, and the community language programs fall under my purview. So, what do?
Jeremy?
Sionagad, Jeremy Charles. I am the owner of Fire Thief Productions, a Cherokee-owned film production company based in Tulsa. And one of my main goals is to help the language department in furthering the Cherokee language and preservation and restoration, and through what I'm able to do. That's what whatever I can contribute, that's what I'm trying to do.
Sionagad, Udawadisgv like and Dawadon. Gala Eliga Chichiluki ko Sahiye deal. Nugawa use a dega chalak one of his diani with Saskun and Dolthasa. Gala Eliga Chichiluki. My name is Wade or Ryan Mackey. I'm the program manager for the Cherokee Language Master Apprentice program. Wadon.
Now Kristen needs to talk.
Sionagad, Udawadisgv. Cherokee Kawani Sask. My name is Kristen Thomas. I work for the Cherokee Language Master Apprentice program. I get to be your moderator for today's language panel. So I know these gentlemen all have lots of irons in the language fire right now, and so they could go on and talk about some of the things that they're currently working on right now, but we really wanted this to be attendee focused. So anyone has questions about anything language related at the moment, new activities, new ventures, possibly future ventures, please start rolling those questions in now, and I will funnel them to our panelists. If there's anyone specific you'd like to hear from, please let us know in that question and answer panel. If not, then I will just try to filter those questions to who I think can provide some good quality answers. So
I have a question. For those out there,
send that in the question and answer panel. I'm kidding.
I don't even know how to do that. I would love to hear on behalf of some of the people who don't know a lot of what you guys, there's a lot of people who don't know how extensive the language department, is a leader among Indian country, because you guys have done such a good job and are continuing to get bigger and better and with your preservation efforts. Could you tell us kind of what kind of things you guys do day to day and to preserve the language?
Roy, you are at the top of my panelist list right here. So I see you first. So I'm going to pick on you a lot. But if you want to lead us off with that,
All right, yeah,
we could be here a while.
Well, as Jeremy mentioned, the language program is, we have quite a lot going on. And Howard mentioned when we started that we recently got moved under one umbrella. So we have a formal Cherokee language department now. And what that means is we're at the same level as like education services or health services, all the other programs at Cherokee Nation. We're on that same structural level now under the same umbrella with the budget and all this. So it encompasses quite a lot of things like the immersion school, master apprentice, then we have like the translation program, all the classes that are out there in the communities and the online classes, and we have a partnership with RSU and the Cherokee Language Consortium Group, which is the 3 tribes, the Cherokee Nation, United Kituwa Band, and Eastern Band, quarterly meetings of speakers and language advocates. So all of this is under one umbrella now. We used to be spread across a lot of different areas, so it's good to see that coming together. And with that, it gives us more strength to share our resources rather than having run here and there and back and forth. And we've been doing a lot of this work for many years now, so we're glad that we're finally together to move this thing forward. And we have partners like with Jeremy and Fire Thief to do, you might have seen his talk about the animation project earlier. And if you missed I had a pre-recorded session that goes more in depth about all the language programs, but if you missed that, you can watch that at a later time too on here.
What I Nina?
Well, on a daily basis, until recently, I was a curriculum supervisor for Master Apprentice Language Program. I was part of the team that helped develop it, and we worked with a lot of native speakers. The original speakers were Doris Shell, Gary Van, and Cora Flute, and they worked together to make sure that we were successful, and we've recently expanded it. We were taking 4 new folks every year. Now we've quadrupled it, and we're really excited about the success rate. When they graduate from our program, they're not completely fluent, not on the same level as elder first language native speakers, but they are conversational and they can teach in a Cherokee language immersion environment. They can stay in Cherokee all day and they can express themselves. And it's something that we're all very proud of. My son was an immersion school graduate, Agali Sikh Dudon, his name's Agali Sikh, and he and I try to talk Cherokee on a daily basis. In our traditional community, we use Cherokee a lot, and I just use it on everything I can. I myself am a second language speaker, and I am not completely fluent, but I'm doing my best, and I like to consider myself a language advocate.
Udawadisgv.
I was enjoying listening to everybody else. I do want to give a little bit of a shout out, since when we came up with this panel, it was before the language department came about. And since that happened, we've had a couple of leaders that have stood up. One is a Mr. Alduhin, aka Wyman Kirk, who's the administrator over the immersion school, and the other one is Jeremy Hammer, who is the principal over the immersion school. So they're doing a great job, and they are going to do even a better job. It's interesting times because we've had to go virtual in the Master Apprentice program, the 14th generation, and also the immersion school. So in the middle of that, we've also found that, some of the things that we've done going online is we project will actually help us as the years go by to push the language even further out there. So it caused us to get a little bit out of our comfort zone, but sometimes you have something like that just to make you grow. So we're in the middle of that, but we are also in the middle of really finaling the plans for the school. It is going to be located in the old casino here in Telequa. But also there's 2 wings on both sides of that. So right now the old casino building is about 20,000 square foot. And by the time it is done, it's going to be over 50,000 square foot. So a little more than double our square footage. Also, we're really excited about the language village that is going to be coming soon. That is going to be right adjacent to that. Was really, really excited about it because that was something that Durbin had told Ryan and I when we showed him the plans for Master Apprentice. He pulled out a book and I think it was May 10th, 1974, he pointed and said, "Guys, are you trying to build this?" And Ryan and I said, "Yeah, this is what we're trying to build." He already had that idea in the 70s about the Master Apprentice and how that would work in the Cherokee language. He flipped a few pages over and said, "Your next step is to build a language village." And we was excited to be able to, we're still grieving his loss, losing him, but we was excited to be able to go to him and said, the final thing you told us to do, it's coming. So, so there's a lot of things that's going on. We meet daily. The guys that's on this panel, they all work 50, 60 hours a week on language revitalization. We can get into, different apps, cartoons, things we're doing, a language corpus, more extensive language corpus, to a online learning site that we're working on for the school now. And it just keeps going on and on and on to, even today we have a grant that's due. So we are working around the clock. I think last night, it was on a Sunday, and I think I had 3 different conference calls yesterday evening because that many people was working trying to make sure we don't lose our language. And so that's really important to us. So if I believe I've somewhat answered this, what Kristen was wanting me to talk about, and probably went over. So I'll be quiet, and hopefully there's a question here. So,
Udawadisgv, we do have a question. This question is from Bree. Bree is a grad student in linguistic anthropology. She's really interested in the connections between the Cherokee language and our well-being, individually and communally. So what Bree is interested in knowing where you all see the intersections between language and our well-being, if you do at all. So I would like to first send this question to Ryan, and if there's anyone else that would like to share some ideas about this as well, please be prepared. Wade?
CCO, yeah, CCO Bree and everybody else. I think that, you were specifically asking about where we see intersections between language and well-being. And, there's a few things written about it. And we've talked a little bit with one of our grant partners. We're also part of a grant called NLCC, Native Language Community Coordination. And the grant is focused on 5 different tribes. And we're just one of those in the cohort. But one of our TAs, one of our facilitators, she's written a little bit about this. And she's been able to provide us with a little bit of that research. But our own experiences you know, direct testaments to how wellness, well-being is tied to language revitalization. You know, everybody that goes to learn the heritage language, especially if it's an endangered indigenous language like ours, is going to have suffered some trauma. They're going to have transgenerational trauma, and a lot of people are going to have trauma in their lives from, you know, different aspects of colonization. The initial shock of learning the language is addictive because there's a lot of joy and pleasure from reconnecting to a part of ourselves that we had felt lost to. However, that's short-lived because there's also a lot of suffering. It seems like when you open the floodgates, you not only get the positive, but you get all the struggles and challenges that have come along with the loss of our language and its decline. And sometimes people are shook with that, and sometimes they're triggered with their own trauma. And that's something that we'd like to warn our participants about. And everybody goes through a struggle. Everybody that's been in our program has been through a struggle. Some people, it was almost insurmountable. But for those that have stuck with it, for those that have maintained their path, they've found this sense of strength, because not only do we learn the language of our elders and our ancestors, we learn to think like our ancestors. It's almost like we've picked up something that we didn't know existed. I like to liken it to, you know, all of us are old enough to have watched Wizard of Oz. And the first part of Wizard of Oz is in black and white, and then suddenly it shifts to color. And you forget that it's black and white until it shifts to color. For a lot of people relearning the language that their ancestors spoke is shifting the world in a way that they'd never seen it before. You see things, you hear things in a brand new way. And it's healing. It's a healing process. And although it hurts and there's some pain involved with the growth, ultimately people's lives are better for it. And each individual will have their own testament about how their life grows and how joy expands from this process. But one of the things that I've seen happen again and again is that with this language as a tool, they're able to step into the mainstream world and actually do better at things that, you know, our ancestors sometimes sacrificed a lot. They gave up a lot just so they could be successful for survival. And when we come to that same arena equipped with our language, it seems like we cannot fail. And I think that ultimately, it not only connects us to our elders, our ancestors, our communities, and our families, but it connects us to our place and our role within this contemporary world. And it gives us a sense of purpose. And it's almost like how some people work out to feel healthy. And it's a good way to cope with problems, being able to look at it from a completely different worldview.
I had a follow-up question on that. Like something that people might be interested in is something that I've heard you guys talk about a lot, is how the language, the Cherokee language, actually contains a worldview in it, right? And that's not something you can convey very easily in, say, English. Could one of you kind of talk about, you know, I've heard both Howard and Ryan talk about there's a way of viewing the world conveyed when you're speaking Cherokee. Is that, could somebody talk about that?
I can feel that Howard wants to dive into that question.
Well, Ryan and I was both looking at one another because you mentioned one of our names, you know, both of our names. We were thinking, oh, we'll let the other one answer that. Ryan does dive pretty deep in that, but while he was talking and looking at Kristen's picture standing beside Durbin, you know, makes me remember some things that happened in my personal growth, and I'll share with you what how your mind thinks different. When I first met Durbin, he carried around this brown box of tapes, and it was this cardboard box of his tapes that he taped elders, and he would go through these all the time. And so one day, I know he just set the tapes at just the right place, and he asked, he came in and said, Udawadisgv. Actually, he called me Ukahist. So Ukahist, why don't you, come over here and tell me the sounds that certain animals make, So he'd ask a question, a horse running, what sound does that make? And I wouldn't make the sound the best of my ability. And then, he would say a bird, a certain type of bird, or a chicken, or, whatever it may be. A dog barking, what sound does that make? And each time he would put in the tape, because I guess he had spent, some time before preparing for me. So he'd put in a tape of a speaker, it was one of the old cassette tapes. And as soon as you press play, they would make the sound of how that animal, how they heard it. And I remember him saying, I was like, Durbin, how is this even possible? I can hear the rain falling. I know how it sounds. But when a Cherokee hears it, it sounds different. And he said, so when you speak Cherokee, you have different ears. And I thought, I could not understand him. And so after we started the Master Apprentice program, there was a time that, you stay in Cherokee, and I remember people trying to teach me how to say quail. They would get irritated because they would say it's what it says. And I couldn't remember it. It's like gukwe. It's what it says. And so they was confused when I was having a hard time. So I was driving down the road, and I was going to go check on our cows, and out of the blue, I heard gukwe, gukwe, and because I had the windows down. I'm hearing a bird say quail in Cherokee. How's that even possible? And gukwe, it said. And then I started thinking in English, and it said Bob White. And so my whole life I had heard that bird say Bob White. And when I started thinking in Cherokee song, it said gukwe. And so that happens through everything. You have a different, just like you have a different ears if you speak Cherokee. You have a different sound that you make if you speak it. You have a different mind, and you have a different heart. And because that has been passed down through maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 generations of people that had a different mind or a different heart than what we know as mainstream culture now, then that started being built in our language. And so it's not, when you start really getting into the roots of what things mean, it's almost like speaking Cherokee and listening to the roots is almost like sitting in church. It's almost like just the depths of it is almost like going to a camp meeting or going to a stomp grounds and staying there for 2 or 3 days. It has that lasting effect on you that it changes your mind, because it's all really, really steeped in a different philosophy, a different understanding. And it's so much deeper than what we're used to when we speak English. So.
Wade, I know that Jeremy wanted to hear some additional thoughts that you had on that topic, but this is an excellent question, and I'd really like to hear from all panelists. So, Roy, anything that you would like to share? I'd like to ask you to do that after Wade.
the question that Howard just answered?
Saludos.
Oh,
Maybe you can just give a little more about some of your personal experiences that you talked about in the chat in case anybody missed it.
Oh, yeah, in the chat, I was just remarking on Howard's experience. I said, I had a similar experience with the bird name Uguku. And now when I hear these things, they talk to me in Cherokee. I worked for 3 years at the language immersion school. And when I see little kids, I automatically talk to them in Cherokee on accident, especially if I'm getting on to them. I do that with elders too. I'll go to other Native communities for conferences or whatever. And when I'm talking to an elder, I talk to them in Cherokee. When I see signs like street signs or road signs, or a great example, that DSW, shoe store. When I read that, it says Adela to me. It says money. I'm sure a lot of people spend money there too. When I think, sometimes I think in Cherokee first. And that's new for me. I remember the first time that I dreamed in Cherokee. I catch myself hearing things that I didn't hear before. Howard and I have talked about this in depth. We have to be careful because when we have close relationships with people, we're used to communicating a certain way. But once your ears become attuned to Cherokee, or maybe it's your mind, you hear subtle things that you hadn't heard before, and you get offended really easily because it's almost like you can read their intentions. I also find myself following a different value system than I had before. And it's hard to put your finger on why this is the case. But I think it's because the way that we think in mainstream society is influenced by the West, this great monolith called the West, which has its roots in Greek philosophy. You go all the way back to the early Greek thinkers, people like Plato and Aristotle. Those synonymous with education, and they spread from Europe across the boat to here. And this is how we think. This is how we're trained to think and be. And when we go into our language and think, we think about it from a different angle. We don't have words like perfection in Cherokee. We don't have words like opposite. We have words that are similar, but they really don't mean the same thing. Even the Platonic ideal of the ether, where the ideal forms exist, and artisans reach up into this ether to connect to the ideal chair or the ideal sculpture. And then that's their muse, and they create these things. And every artist has a different perspective of what that is, but when it manifests materially, it's no longer the perfect chair. It's no longer the perfect sculpture. It's no longer that ideal because it's physical. And we don't have that. We don't have that in Cherokee. A thought is something, but it's not greater than what we hold in our hands. And I guess that's it for me.
Well, I've got one of my favorite things to think about in this topic is, when everybody starts learning Cherokee, you'd have your basic phrases, and one of the most common is tohiju. They always say it means like, how are you doing, or something to that effect. But when you talk about what it really means, the word tohi is peace. So it's kind of asking, are you at peace? It's more than just saying, how are you doing? And there's a lot of things like that in Cherokee that have this much deeper meaning, and it feeds into that worldview of how Cherokee speakers can see the world. And we all keep mentioning Durbin, but I remember one time he taught me something that I thought was really neat. He asked me, how do you say the word brown? And I said Udawadisgv. He said, how do you say you're pretty? And I said Owodu. And then he said, how do you say mud? And it's like Tlawodu. They're all connected. So this idea of this something that's beautiful or pretty is connected to the earth and the ground, and the color, browns. I thought that was a really great demonstration of how the words in Cherokee can have a really, really deep meaning. So, he really taught us a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, I know that we've all been touched by Durbin personally and professionally, and all of our work is really laid on that foundation that he built for us for several decades now, and we're so thankful for him. And Jeremy, I recall a little bit from your morning session, and I've scrolled through our attendee list, and it looks like we have some different people there. And you mentioned getting into the communities and spending some time with these first language speakers and these families in our Cherokee communities and some of those experiences. And so I think you have some really good information that you could share to this topic. Although it was your question, I'd still like to hear your perspective as well.
Well, let me preface it by saying I'm not a Cherokee speaker like everyone else here on the panel. Although I'm, plodding my way into, elementary knowledge, I still, my mind works in that English mode that you guys, are kind of pointing out to me. And that's why I was fascinated by the power of the language to actually encapsulate your worldview. That to me is, I'm getting chills again. That is something that we in the Western society, in this monolithic society that we're in, is very materialistic, right? I mean, you guys can go way more into this than I am, but the fact that the meaning is not as embedded, it's very object or materialistic. But going into communities, I'm someone who's raised not in the community, in a lot of ways. And so for me, when I'm out to go see, a Woody Hare or a lot of different, cool people on their turf, it's really amazing to go to folks in their comfort zone, in their world, and you just occupy space in their world. That's what really fascinates me, though. That's why I asked that question, because there's so many ways of living that maybe we don't have, and understanding that as an English speaker, you can't really understand. And, I guess what you don't know in my case. It's like, well, how are they looking at the world? As a filmmaker, that's what I do all day long, is like, I'm always asking, like, well, how is this person viewing the world? And trying to put yourself in their shoes. And that's what's beautiful about, one of the beautiful things about the Cherokee language to me, and that's what keeps drawing me back into, because of this topic that we're talking about, is, I think maybe it's true for all of us, but, I'm digging and searching and trying to get to a place where I understand what all these wise people already know, that my brain doesn't comprehend.
Kristen, you're moderating this, and I may just ask you a question. Would that be fine?
I'm going to need you to use the question and answer panel as provided to you at the bottom of your screen.
So, Ryan and all of us have talked a little bit, but, we're really experiencing the loss of a lot of speakers, and you're seeing how this is growing, and you're seeing how many we lose. Can you speak to the effect of the state of our language?
Oh my. I can try. As far as my personal experiences go, anyway, thank you for the opportunity to speak, Howard. For me, I would like to discuss a project that our team conducted in late 2018, 2019. And that was the Cherokee Speaker Rollbook. I think it came out of lunch, and folks started talking about, we think we have an idea just about how many Cherokee speakers that first language speakers are living, but the numbers changed. There were surveys done back in 2002. We felt like those weren't accurate. Some informal counts have been done since then, and we needed some accurate numbers. So folks that represented all of the language teams that you see here today really put their heads together and just started with the list, started creating a list of all of the speakers that were living in their communities. And from there, we just reached out to all of the other communities, and eventually that list went to those Cherokee speakers living at large. Eventually, we had a list of about 2,000 names or so that then needed to be confirmed, and some information about them needed to be confirmed. And we wanted to do that in the most respectable and loving way possible. So we started the Cherokee Speaker Roll project, and our hope was to go out and shake the hands of every Cherokee speaker, first language Cherokee speaker that is represented in the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, the United Couture Band of Cherokee Indians, and the Cherokee Nation as well, and those with non-tribal affiliation, and just be able to meet them, shake their hand, and to be in the presence of all Cherokee speakers. And so we got to do that for about 9-10 months or so over the course of 13 community meetings and one large celebration of Cherokee speakers that was held in Tahlequah in September 2019. We had the opportunity to shake the hands and honor about 1,400 of those Cherokee speakers. And when those meetings started, they started in was March of 2019, and we met in Belfont. We had about 60 speakers present at that meeting, and the tone and the feel of the meeting was, we get to come and we get to honor these speakers. They received a medallion that recognized them as a first language Cherokee speaker. We got to feed them dinner, no strings attached. Didn't ask anything of them. We were just there to serve them. We recognized the oldest speaker in the room, the youngest speaker in the room with a small token. And it really felt like they were being honored as the last generation of Cherokee speakers. That was the feel of the day. And so by the time 12 more community meetings came and went, and we had our celebration of Cherokee speakers in September, the tone had changed. And the speakers no longer felt like they were being honored as the last generation of Cherokee speakers. The speakers felt like they were there to be activated, and they were there to be with one another and to rally around second language speakers and to build a network of speaker support and resources for the language efforts that are going on in our communities. And in that short time, we saw a shift from these individuals, that carry that worldview in every step that they take, in every breath that they take, everything that we would like to have for ourselves as second language speakers or second language learners. And they do it so effortlessly, they have it unconsciously. And we strive for that. And we got to see their shift from being recognized as the last generation of Cherokee speakers to the first generation to engage and to activate the movements that will continue to come. And had I been asked this question a year ago, Howard, I think my answer would have been very different. But I think the state of our language is we're in a strong place, and we're in a hopeful place, and we're in a very blessed position to be able to move forward arm in arm with our first language speakers at our side and behind us, guiding our every move. And I think we're in a really blessed position right now. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to share that a little bit. And like I said, that is from my perspective alone, and that's something that I've experienced in the last year and a half or so. Speakers reach out and want to know how they can help us out. They call and say, hey, we want to, I got a new email address. They call the tribe. And I've gotten a couple of phone calls from Cherokee First that say, hey, I have a Cherokee speaker here, and they wanted to let you know that they have a new email address, and they wanted to update that with you. That's a unique thing. That wouldn't have happened a couple of years ago. And that's because they believe in what's happening, and they're here and they want to be a part of those, and they feel welcomed to do so now. And so that's really exciting.
That's beautiful. Kristen, I'm going to field a question in the Q&A. I'm not going to field it. I'm going to introduce it. I'm going to read it and let the four of you field it. Ellis is asking, and also Christiana, what advice do you have for at-large members who have minimal contact with the language or other Cherokees, but want to be able to speak more effectively? Y'all take turns.
I would like to introduce that just a little bit. I know I would like to say that about 10 years ago, this would be a much greater challenge to language learners outside of Cherokee-speaking communities. And we've found that that's not the case anymore. You know, we live in a much smaller world, and we have access to just about anything we need at our fingertips. And some individuals and Roy's team have worked very diligently at making sure that language is available to those individuals in our communities, both local and at large as well. So I'd like to hand it over to Roy and just talk about some of those resources that you have, some online resources that are available, and perhaps some publications that are available to at-large learners.
Yeah, so we have a language section on the Cherokee Nation website, language.cherokee.org. That'll take you to the main page, and there's going to be a lot of content on there. It'll have schedules for community classes, links to online classes. It will have a lot of downloadable content. If you want to install the Cherokee language on your phone or your computer, it tells you how to do that. It has lots of fonts in Cherokee language, and there's a lot of activity books, classroom posters, word lists, just some dictionaries, and this is all a PDF format, so there are some couple of books too. And with all of this, a lot of this content has recordings that go with it, and they're all on that site as well. So for anyone no matter what level you are, there's quite a lot of content to start learning Cherokee. A lot of beginner content, some intermediate, not a lot of advanced, but you can work your way through a lot of that. So having said all that, we do have another site that's learn.cherokee.org. And that's where you go take the online classes. Like many of you have taken classes with Ed Fields, so you might be familiar with that format. But in addition to Ed's classes, we have a lot of other content. For example, we have the famous See, Say, Write book in Cherokee. Durbin did that book to help people learn how to read and write the syllabary, but it's been digitized, so you can take all the lessons online, listen to all, hear the voices being read to you, and you can take the quizzes online, and it's all free. And then we have other similar quizzes about different vocabulary, like that for animals and birds and other things like that are on there. There's like clouds. So there's all kinds of things on that site for you to look at. In addition to that, there is a link to an online college level course that the department's has a partnership with Rogers State University here in Oklahoma. And that class is, You can take it for college credit, which means you have to pay, tuition for it. But you can also take it for free if you don't want any credit. There's an option to take that, and it's 48 episodes. Each one's about 50 minutes long, so it's quite a lot of content in Cherokee language. In terms of community classes, typically we host classes throughout the 14-county area, and we have a couple of at-large instructors as well. Those were in person, but because of the pandemic, we're not doing that at the moment. But we are exploring how we can utilize our instructors through an online format. So you might have a lot of options to take different classes from different teachers and hear different ways how things are said. So I see in this chat, there's someone from asking questions about where they can find some of these classes. Again, they're normally in person in the 14-county area, but we're moving everything online. So normally they start in October as well. So I think by then we'll have a pretty good plan in place to start doing these community classes online. And the online courses that I'm talking about for the community are more, they're open to the public, to anyone to take it. So they're very basic level classes, but it's a good enrichment class to take.
Roy, we had a couple of other questions from local communities looking to see how classes can be brought to them face-to-face when that's safer again. So is there contact information that you can share perhaps in the chat group where they could reach out in the future?
Yeah, I'll fill that in there, but we have a catch-all email and we have phone numbers, and the way it works is usually if a community wants a class, they just request it and we'll send them. We have about 30 contract instructors in file that we call up, so we have someone kind of in every area, at least that I know of. Not at large, but within our area, we have to cover that.
Looks like we've got a few minutes left. What would you like to do with the rest of our time, guys? Maybe talk about some exciting projects. The language center is going. I want to hear about the village and how the village is going to work. That's a really cool idea. Can you tell us about how that works? It's an actual physical, basically housing development, right? All the speakers are all the residents are speakers. Is that how it works?
Well, it's coming with a couple of ideas behind it. And I see Roy and I see Ryan both, and Kristen, who has worked just as hard as anybody has on this. So I'm maybe a little selfish jumping ahead of them, but there's a couple of things. One thing is there's a different idea of how speakers deal with internal issues with their family. And so where somebody may get totally, in a non-Cherokee world, call the cops on their kids or something like that. Speakers don't do that. And so as time has went on, we have made more and more contact with speakers, and we have found, for one thing, is that there is speakers being taken advantage of majorly. One thing, substance abuse problem is such of an issue in our communities that there's been times that all of us have, everybody here, for a fact, I know everybody here has drove to, the next block or two away from a speaker's home and waited for them to come out and get in your car, and you take them to a safe place, right? So we knew that there was a need, and Chief knew there was a need because he has, opened up places and stuff for us to make sure that that we was able to protect speakers if they was in some sort of situation. So every time we've ever called Chief with a problem like that, no matter it's 11, 12 o'clock at night, he has always found a way to protect them speakers. So that, I know that's one thing that's been on his mind. Another thing is there is there's a need for speakers and students to live side by side. And so behind the language center, there's a 50-acre tract, and then beside that 50-acre tract, I think there's a 30-acre tract, and then Chief and Council has came up and has purchased a 10-acre tract that has the pine trees. So the first 5 is going to be in that 10-acre tract. It is something that's coming through, that sort of thing, but that's going to be primarily focused just on speakers and elder speakers, you may say. Behind that, as we start to expand, we start building infrastructure for the roads and different things back there. The idea is to have a speaker next to a learner. So it may be a situation, it's hard to project, but it may be a situation where a speaker is able to live there for free or almost close to free, but the learner will have to, do rent or something to that effect. But they in that project, they have to be able to take care of that speaker that's beside them, mow the lawn, do different things. And, and a lot of times, in the last few months, last few years, we get more and more, know the speaker community, having projects in the community. You find out that a lot of them are lonely, and they just want to be able to talk. And so the idea, as a second language learner myself, to find somebody that wants to talk Cherokee to me is great. And what an honor to be able to sit and talk with them, and to take care of them as well. And so and for them to not spend the last few years of their life feeling like they're not giving back, they're given the ultimate gift back, and that is their heart. So that's a little bit what we're talking about. And there's more to it. These other guys can jump in anytime.
You kind of go back to the idea of immersion, right? If you're in an environment that's always speaking in Cherokee, you pick it up a lot faster, right?
That's the concept. What, Roy? I feel like I'm being a mic hog. So we have one more minute?
We have 1 more minute.
I feel like sharing something. Can I do that?
Yeah.
So when Kristen was talking, I asked her the question, and then I prompted, because we're all always here. And we knew Ryan had worked with the speakers back in June of 2013, and he had counted 34 speakers passed away in June of 2013. And then the following month, there was 33 speakers passed away in July. And I think he went on a 6 months depression almost, and he, it had messed him up. And so, and Roy had been working with translators, and he was calling, telling us different speakers had passed. So somewhere along the line there, we started tracking. You're not going to get everybody, because, there's, especially in the middle of a pandemic, because not everybody's in telephone. But over time, we started tracking them, and people started calling. And so I think I can see. Can people see that? So that's a list that people call. If they text, it ends up, they start texting them, and we start putting on the list. And so this is added up in months of how many speakers we're losing. And so this is a personal note. These are people they're our friends. And so, Ryan, Roy, all of them have dealt with it enough where they just like, hey, we'll just text Howard and Howard will put it on the list. And so speakers and community members and that sort of stuff started texting. So most of the time, if a speaker passed, a lot of times I know within that, sometimes within just a few minutes, and sometimes it takes a day or two. But my kids, we'll be sitting eating dinner, and I'll get text, and I'm like, oh man, we just lost a speaker, and so they've been dealing with this for 2, possibly 3 years, and I think it was last month. I think it was 4th of July. We had a speaker who was close to all of us had passed, and he was in the middle of doing fireworks, and then we had Woody, and there's some different ones, and so they started saying, hey, Dad, Ed, don't tell us, because we know that's part of what you had to do, but don't tell us anymore of what's happening, because we care about these and we don't want to be grieving, and so I've done that in the last couple of months, because it was affecting them, because they're in emergency school and it means so much to them, speakers. But there's a little thing that I try to do, and like this month I've had several speakers that's dear to my heart that has passed, but I've kind of rebelled against the list. I won't write their names down, so there's a spot for a couple of them there. I'll put a spot where their name goes, and I know who's there, but I don't think it's right until I'm finished grieving to write their names down. So as much as things is happening, as much as we are growing, and we're feeling the growing pains by all means, it's still real to us, because these are our friends, and our friends are dying. So, but thanks for everything, and it started getting a little bit too close to home, so somebody else can finish up.
Udawadisgv, we appreciate that. We know that everything that everyone on this panel and lots of others, the work is not limited to the individuals that you see here. We're the one they invited us to be here today. That's it. So there's lots of amazing work happening in our communities and across all 3 tribes. And so we're fortunate to be a part of that, and we're really fortunate to be a part of the lives of our first language speakers as well. And I thank you all for your time and your good words today. I think we've gone a couple minutes over, but thank you for being here today. Thanks for sharing your afternoon with us, and everyone who is here can be reached at Cherokee.org addresses. I think contact information for the panelists is available in your app and the website as well. So if there's anything that wasn't covered today or anything else you'd like to know, I think I speak on behalf of all the panelists. Please reach out, and we'd like to hear from you all. Thanks for being here this afternoon, and
Take care, everybody.